In part 6 of lecture 6, we will discuss arrays of objects. Just as we frequently need to use arrays of integers and arrays of other types, we will sometimes need to use arrays of objects. As we will see, using arrays of objects is a bit different from using other arrays, but not by that much. Before we start looking at arrays of objects, let's look at a specific class of objects, namely a student record. Because we'll need input, again we begin with import java.util.scanner. And as we start to write the definition for the class, we'll begin with the header public class student record. There are 4 pieces of information, 4 properties we will need to keep in mind. Private string first name, private string last name, private int year, and private double GPA. Now, since these are private items, we're going to need accessors if we want access to their data. And for that reason, we'll have public string get first name, which will have exactly one statement in it, return first name. And then public string get last name, and inside that, return last name. The remaining 2 accessors are public int get year, which will return year, public double GPA, which has the statement return GPA. Just as we needed accessors to get access to the data, in order to change them, we're going to need mutators. The first 2 are seen here. Public void set first name string fn. Inside that, first name equals fn. And public void set last name string ln. And inside that, last name equals ln. The last 2 mutators, public void set year int yr, will have the one statement year equals yr. Public void set GPA double GPav, and inside that GPA equals GPav. And after the close brace for the second mutator, we now have a second close brace to close the class. This is the first part of the class student records, records in the plural. Because there's going to be input, I begin with import java.util.scanner. Then I have the header, public class student records. There are 3 properties that the class has. Public final int maxint equals 15. In other words, there is an upper limit of 15 students. Private int num students, which will have the actual number of students for whom I have records. That number may be less than the maximum. And the main property for the class is the array, public student record, open close brackets, students. With this, I have a reference to the array, but as of yet, I don't have anything in it. I have a default constructor here, public student records. And the first thing that I do is I construct the array by writing students equals new student record, and inside square brackets, max students. That means I now have a place to put references for the records for 15 students. Now I need to construct each of the individual objects. I'll use a counting loop for this. For int I equals 0, I is less than max students, I++. Students I equals new student record. Now I haven't yet entered any information into any of these, so the number of students is 0. On the other hand, I have a reference to the array overall, and I have references to each of the objects. As I promised before, we now have an input method, public int read records. I begin by declaring the variables, scanner keyboard equals new scanner system in, string, in string equals new string, int new year, double new GPA. Now I'm going to instruct the users first, as a comment indicates. System out println, enter, quote, end, unquote, to indicate no more students. Now for each student, I'm going to input the first name and the last name, year of graduation, and grade point average. I begin the for loop with for num students equals 0, num students is less than max students, num students plus plus. I ask for first name, system out println first name, tab question mark, and then I read it in string equals keyboard next. If what they entered was simply the word end, there are no more records. So we do not want to continue doing anything else along the way. So we have here if inString dot equals end break. This will get us out of the for loop. Otherwise, we go below. Students, num students, dot set first name, inString dot trim. We'll get rid of any leading and trailing blanks that I may have, and the rest of it I'll set as the first name. I'll now write system out print last name, tab question mark, to prompt the user for a last name, inString equals keyboard dot next. Now what I'll do here is the same sort of thing. Students, num students, dot set last name, inString dot trim. I'll get rid of any leading and trailing blanks on the last name, and I'll set that as the last name. Now I'll read the year. System out println year, tab question mark, to prompt the user. New year equals keyboard dot next int to get that year. Students, num students, dot set year, new year will give this particular student a value for the year of their class. Lastly, the grade point average. System out println grade point average, tab question mark, new GPA equals keyboard dot next double, because it is a double value. Students sub num students dot set GPA, new GPA. We're out of the loop, and what we'll return is the number of students as we have been updating it. The only other method is write record. We will print the record of a student indicated by the index in the array. Public void write record int index. Now we're going to print here the first name, last name, the year, and GPA. System out println students sub index dot get first name, and then a tab. Student sub index dot get last name, and a tab. Student sub index dot get year, and a tab. Students sub index get GPA, and a tab. Now the reason why we are using the accessors is because in this case the object, the class in question, it has the objects as a property and does not have direct access to its information. Therefore, we will use the accessors like any other method. After we have the closing brace for read write record, we'll have the closing brace for the class. To see how we can make use of this class, we're going to look at Dean's list. We begin with import java util.scanner, so we can make use of input. The header for the class is public class Dean's list. And now let's take a look at the header for main. Public static void main string args. Student records stud equals new student records. Int I, comma, num students equals 0, because we don't have any students yet. We will now input the data. Students equals stud read records. We now know exactly how many students we did read, which might be the maximum of 15 or a lower figure. The other half of the main method is a for loop, where we will look to print data about students with grade point averages of 3.5 or higher. For I equals 0, I is less than num students, I++, and here's the condition determining whether or not we print. If stud.students sub I dot get GPA is greater than or equal to 3.5, stud.write record I. So it will be the ith record that we write for this student. The close brace is for main, and then the other one is for class. And with this ends lecture 6.